Traders, how are you? With Marcello, we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. This week, we have a lot of news about the new but the supercomputer at Tesla, a horrible earthquake that killed thousands of people in Morocco, and good news and some bad news on the inflation front. Let's go ahead and get started. Biggest news in the week is what happened with the inflation front. The CPI, which is the consumer price index, meaning you and I are consumers. We go out and buy money on things, and that's the amount at which the increase in prices has happened. For August, it actually went up to 3.7%. This is on a yearly basis, right? So they take the number for just the month of August, and then they annualize it. This is higher than what it was before at 3.2%. Now, this has a lot of effects because it's a situation where the consumer spending in the United States is almost 70% of the economy. So if things get a lot more expensive and they continue getting more expensive, which the consumers have already been kind of squeezed in the market, then they're going to get squeezed even more, and then they're not going to be able to spend money, which is basically 70% of the economy. Now, there is a secondary effect to this, which comes to the interest rates. If the inflation rate continues to go up or it creeps up, then there might be a higher probability that the central bank in the United States actually continues to raise rates or leaves rates higher for longer than what we want them to be. This is not a good thing for consumers because the higher the inflation rate is, the higher the interest rates go, which means that the more expensive it is for you and I to buy everything. Now, they did say that the August inflation was 3.7%, and as everything that the government tells you, which is not true, go and get your 18th booster. There's a site called Shadow Stats, which I follow. They calculate the inflation as if it was calculated in 1980 because it's been revised a few times. If we were calculating the inflation at the same rate that we were, the same way I should say that we were in 1980, inflation would be at about 12%. Now, an interesting stat or number that came out was food at employee sites and schools were up 57.6% year over year. So on this corner, we have the government saying, oh, inflation, it's fine. It's only 3 or 4%. But the cost of food has gone up almost 60%. See how that works? And this is an example I always give. Some of you guys are tired of it, but we got some new people on the show every week. So I'm just going to repeat it. I went to Five Guys during the pandemic in 2020, $20, 2 burgers, combo, Five Guys, no problem. 2 years later, right? About 2.5 years later, because I went earlier this year in 2023, $20 now is only enough for one person. So you can see how the rate at which food goes up, because obviously that doesn't matter, right? It's actually been about 50% a year or so, right? So start your side hustle. Subway, I thought this was actually pretty interesting. Subway launched its first ever 3-inch sandwich to tackle inflation. So as some of the news articles that came out, if you want to save money on inflation, just starve yourself. Right? That's that's what the elites, that's the way they look at us. Now, because of the situation with the inflation and the expectation of what's going to happen with the interest rates, the US dollar actually hit a 6-month high. The markets in the United States, Dow was the only positive one in the US. Canada was positive as well. In overseas market news, the European markets were mostly higher. London, the FTSE, what a British name for an stock exchange. No, the FTSE. That went up over 3%. Latin America was mostly higher. There was a great interview with the potential presidential candidate of Argentina, Milei. He's a anti-socialist. He did a great interview on Twitter with Tucker Carlson. If you guys want to listen to it, it's actually pretty good. Africa and the Middle East looks like we're about 50-50. South Africa was the most positive there. And then in the far east, in Asia and Australia, Nikkei from Japan was the biggest winner there at 2.84%. Bitcoin and crypto news. Bitcoin didn't move that much this week. It went up 3.29% to 26,629. And we do have an update with FTX, which was the second largest crypto exchange, which went bankrupt. According to a court filing, they have $7 billion in assets, including 38 properties in the Bahamas worth $200 million. Commodities, oil now is at a 10-month high. Global oil markets are facing quite a bit of a shortfall in the next quarter. According to analysts, 3 million barrels a day is going to be the shortfall. This is due to the voluntary production cuts from Saudi Arabia and Russia, two of the largest producers of oil in the world. Thursday, oil hit its highest price in a year, and oil rose for the third straight week due to those production cuts in Russia and Saudi Arabia. Now, this is a bad situation because the higher gas prices go, meaning the higher oil goes, the more the prices, there's more price pressure to go up. Because remember, especially in the United States, the majority of the traffic of goods is by, tractor, not that's how you say it in Spanish. I always do the Spanish videos first. The semi trucks. So if gas continues to go up and we always use gas to send everything everywhere, then the prices are going to continue going up. You see how that works? U.S. crude went up over 3%, actually closer to 4, went up to 90.77, while Brent went up 3.61% to 93.93. And one of the cool things that happened this week in the commodity space is 3 researchers published in a paper journal a discovery which may be the largest lithium deposits anywhere in the world. It's inside of a caldera, an extinct volcano in Nevada near the Oregon border, Oregon. And the 3 people believe that it's a lot bigger than the current biggest reserves in the world, which are in Bolivia under the salt flats. And so this would be a game changer because we wouldn't need 1, China, and 2, overseas materials to be able to go ahead and make the actual batteries themselves. Another report that came out that I thought was really interesting is the carbon footprint of what it takes to make a battery for 1 car is the equivalent of you driving your gas-powered car for 8 years. Not to mention the damage of the environment. But if you guys want to pull up on Google, for example, a lithium mine or a cobalt mine, which the majority of the cobalt comes from literally kids pulling the stuff out of the dirt in the Congo, huge, very bad situation there. Oil doesn't seem that bad when you look at it that way because it's a lot more damaging for the environment and it even pollutes more when it comes to carbon. Don't judge me. I'm just reporting the facts. The Malaysia might look to ban the exports of rare earth metals, joining China and other Asian nations as more and more problems arise with a lot of the materials. More and more nations are going to stop exporting them. This is another really bad thing because obviously the United States needs to open up new mines because everybody's been relying on China for all these years. Gold prices were steady. They didn't go up that much until the end of the week. Gold went up 0.28% to $1,925.10, while silver went up almost 2% to $23.14. Financial and banking news: the 25 to 34 age bracket is living at home at a rate of about 1 to 3 people. That means that of all the people between these ages, every time you meet someone, 1 in 3 is going to be living at home, and that characterizes what's actually going on with the economy. The U.S. Labor Department is also reporting that the U.S. consumer prices have increased by the most in 14 months in August. This has to do, as I mentioned to you guys, when it comes to the rise in the gasoline. But this is also much higher than the Fed's 2% inflation target. And ECB, which is the European Central Bank, they decided to raise their rates as well by 25 basis points, which is 0.25, and they're at about 4%. The Eurozone not in a good condition because they basically have a stagnant economy, and there's reports that Germany, which is the 4th largest economy in the world, is going to hop into a recession, and it's going to be a prolonged recession. Remember that United States still the largest economy in the world, then China and the Eurozone essentially, after you combine them all together, is the 3rd largest economy in the world. Political news: Representative Speaker Kevin McCarthy launched an impeachment inquiry into President Biden, propelling Congress to a possible removal of the Democratic president. This happened to remember that they tried to indict him twice, which failed in the Senate. In economic news, the U.S. automakers and the broader economy might be affected quite a bit with the new strike that the United Auto Workers Union are targeting against the biggest automakers in the United States, which is Ford, GM, and Stellantis. if they have a strike of just 10 days that could affect the US GDP, you know what I'm saying? The US GDP by $5.6 billion. It's quite a bit. Retail sales in the United States and China are positive, but are starting to slow quite a bit. Argentina, in their socialist paradise, their inflation surges to 12.4% in August, the worst since 1991 when the country exited hyperinflation. And Colombia has the new largest export in their country, cocaine. Now the largest export of Colombia outside of women. Bloomberg reports. That was a joke. Maybe a bad joke, but it was good. Corporate news, Meta, which is the owner of Facebook, said that they're developing a new AI system to compete with ChatGPT. They want it to be more powerful than the one that released 2 months ago, and they're aiming to launch that next year. American Airlines, with the new agreement with their pilots union, talked about they're going to have a lot less profit in Q3. Their shares tumbled almost 6% on that news. And BMW is set to invest $750 million in the UK to try to produce all electric mini cars by 2030. Tesla, which is already the world's most valuable car maker, according to the market cap, right? Basically the value of all their shares. That's what that is. They went up by over 10% after Morgan Stanley says that their Dojo supercomputer can power near 600 billion extra in the car maker's bottom line. This has to do with the robo-taxis in addition to the software services, and they just made their 5 millionth car, Tesla did. They're expecting, or their target, I should say, Morgan Stanley says their target, they're raising it 60% to $400. Technology, Qualcomm announced that that they signed a deal on Monday with Apple to make their 5G chips all the way through at least 2026. There was a lot of rumors about Apple making their own chips, which looks like is not a priority for them. And Apple launched their new iPhone 15, new titanium shell, faster chip, and improved the video game playing abilities. One of the things that was really interesting is that they didn't raise the price, which is interesting. It kind of reflects, I think, what's going on with the economy right now. In investment news, Canada is facing a housing affordability crisis. Their governments are blaming their increase in migrants and international students, which they essentially have open borders for that. They're trying to figure out how to do that. And as usual, the government always messes up what they're trying to solve. And Italy, their wine output is looking to fall about 12% due to the situation with bad weather and also diseases affecting the grapevines. The tumble means that France is going to become the new #1 producer of wine in the world for the first time in 9 years. And in international events, Morocco, the deadliest earthquake since 1960, has killed nearly 2,900 people, injured almost 2,500. There was also a deadly storm that affected Libya in the Mediterranean. Over 5 people are presumed dead there, and at least 10,000 people are missing. It literally washed away half of the town. Here in Colombia, for example, I've noticed that we've had an earthquake every single day for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So something's going on. Remember, I told you guys 2020, in December, I did that video. Next 10 years, we're going to have a lot of economic problems, social problems, and a lot of natural disasters as well. The United States waived sanctions to be able to transfer $6 billion to the dictatorship of Iran. There was a prison swap, but the U.S. decided to add on $6 billion onto the deal. Great decision. And there's a UFO hearing in Mexico, which had a presentation of supposed aliens. They said that the aliens come from Peru, and it was first emerged in 2017, and supposedly the aliens are 1,000 years ago, based on carbon dating done by one of the universities in Mexico. The last but not least, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited Russia to explore is not the right word, to inspect the nuke-capable strategic bombers, hypersonic missiles, and also warships. Normally, before people go to a war, they go and inspect what stuff they have ready to go into war. So it doesn't look like we're heading in a good direction, unfortunately. And an interesting fact, a Chinese coffee chain called Luckin Coffee has hit 10,000 stores in China, surpassing Starbucks. Starbucks, their second biggest market after the United States, is China. And obviously, they've had a huge rise in growth due to the fact that this coffee chain was opened in just 2017. That's your news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.